Hello again. My name is Julian Steadman. I'm one of the lay ministers in the Crickhowell area. And it's a great pleasure to welcome you to my home to introduce the third of our programme of Jeremy and Julian on Wednesdays. And we've got quite a mixed bag for you this afternoon, so I'm really looking forward to getting into some of the other items later on. But just before we do so, I'd just like to mention something that's cropped up this week. The launch of a new book, and it's a particularly interesting book because it's been written specifically for the time in which we live, the coronavirus and its implications for the church, but it's also been written by one of our local clergy, Canon Ian Rees, who many of us will know. And so I'm suggesting that as many as can read the book, Church Confident or Closing, it's entitled, and really looking to what the future of the Church of Wales in Wales is going to be like after the coronavirus has stopped. What sort of church are we looking for? And the foreword has been written by our Archbishop John, so clearly he's very much in support of the material that's been put out. And the challenge, I think, for us is that the church must never be the same again. That's what Ian says in the book. So what differences does he want to see? Well, I won't steal his thunder. You must read the book for yourself. But there is a renewed emphasis that he suggests on prayer and Bible study. And of course that theme is very close to my heart. I've been putting out blogs each week about how we can use our morning prayer times constructively, how we can think about the liturgy we use and make that a very real meeting with God on a daily basis as we both read the word and pray. So do read the book, do take it seriously, and I'm hoping that next week Rana will be able to kickstart our debate on how we can apply the principles in the book to our own communities. So go to Amazon, that's where the book is. You can get it on Kindle or in paperback form. So to come back to our programme today, we've got some new contributions coming up for you. First of all, Alison's going to talk to Brenda about how the pandemic is affecting churches in Chile. The second thing is a delightful poem that Helen will be reading to us from her home. Thank you, Helen, for that contribution. And then our final interview will be between myself and Dr. Carl, who is a local GP, and he'll be in conversation about how he's coping with the lockdown situation, both in terms of work and in other ways. And I'll be seeking his tips on how we can cope better during the crisis. So first of all, I'll hand over to Alison.
Chile for Christ is a Christian charity that St Edmund's Church supports annually from its mission fund. Things are very difficult in Chile at the moment, and I'm going to ask Brenda, the director of Chile for Christ, to tell us something about the situation there. As director of Chile for Christ, Brenda, and you've actually visited the country, please describe the situation that concerns you at the moment.
Well, my greatest concern at the moment is the pastors that we support, because we support pastors who are not part of national churches. Their only income is when they have a congregation. There has been a lockdown in Chile because of public unrest, and now we're followed by a lockdown because of COVID. People can only go out once a week if they have a letter of permission to go out. So there are no congregations meeting in churches, hence none of the pastors have any money. The concern I have, the major concern I have at the moment, was the receipt of an email from Pastor Miguel, who lives in Osorno, or at least on the edge of Osorno, in an area called Jardin del Sol, which is a suburb that has been built. And yes, I have been to Chile, and the suburb looks rather like a shanty town, very packed housing and very poor area. Miguel tells us that there is no money in his church, and this will mean that he has no money either. And there are 10 families who have children and have no money to buy food to feed the family. And so he was asking whether Chile for Christ could supply £50 per person for these 10 families, i.e. £500. On top of that, Miguel's son-in-law has had a car crash. He lives in the centre of Osorno and helps Miguel by driving out to the suburb. Rodrigo has been under medical care and is now at home in a wheelchair with no car to drive anywhere. And we would like to support financially Rodrigo and Miguel, because it's a dire situation. I know we have people in this country that have lost all their income because of lack of jobs, but the situation in Chile is 10 times worse because there is just no support from anywhere.
Well, I can see why you're worried, Brenda. The spread of COVID-19 in South America is in the headlines at the moment. Do you think there's a danger that Osorno will be even more affected by that in the near future?
I'm absolutely convinced it's going to be more affected. When people are able to go out and about, because of the packed housing and the poverty in Jardin del Sol, there's almost bound to be a surge in this virus. Osorno in itself has high-rise blocks, and when we visited Rodrigo, when we went to Chile, he lives in a flat which consists of one bedroom, one bathroom, and one living room, smaller than any of the rooms in our house, with plumbing that works sometimes and doesn't work at others. So the chance of actually even keeping your hands clean is very limited. So I'm sure it's going to do an enormous amount of damage, and it will be the people that we're supporting, the poor people, who will end up losing their lives.
So I think people might want to help. Is it what can we do to help? We pray as a church. We send some money annually, but the crisis is now, isn't it? What do you think we can do?
Yes, pray, because not everybody can afford to support financially, but we all have the power of prayer. So yes, power of prayer would be good. Support financially would obviously help tremendously. We have a website, www.chileforchrist, and that's all one word, lowercase, .org. And on the website, our wonderful webmaster puts up alerts of our greatest needs. He puts up pleasant news as well, but there is an alert up asking for financial help, and there is an online donation situation. So that would be wonderful. And also it would be wonderful if people would actually, not only in these crisis situations, but actually keep looking at this website, because we're a very small charity and we could do with help whenever, really.
Yes, thank you. Well, thank you for bringing the crisis to our attention. I think there's lots that we can do to support, and I would like to speak to you again in a few weeks' time, when this is, after a while, when there may be more things that you can add and come back and tell us how things have worked out. Thank you,
That would
Brenda.
be lovely. And if there are any Spanish speakers around, of course, I could bring the news back directly in Spanish, which I do not speak.
Well, there's an appeal for anybody listening. Thank you.
I'd just like to read you out a poem which does take me back to my childhood when times were simpler and it was a lovely sunny time in the garden, I remember. So this one's called Fruits of Summer. I made a pot of jam last night from potent, dark, delicious fruit. I sealed the lid with love myself and made to place it on the shelf, but first I had to taste and try the scent of summer deep inside. Suddenly, to my great pleasure, I was knee-high to the nettles and playing in the swaying grass, blowing hard at flower clocks and counting sugar fairies in summer's kiss, soon to pass, yet still held fast in my memory, a vivid snap in life's brief frame. My mother calls us in for tea, as we all play at children's games, the table spread with jam and bread and other tasty things, lemon curd and Marmite toast, orange squash and biscuits, small cakes iced with silver beads. Who is it now who eats the most? My sister, brother, cousin John eat out in the garden on little wooden chairs, laughing when we drop some crumbs, squinting in the hazy sun. I've put the lid on, screwed it tight, it's back up on the shelf, a taste in time of things so fine to savour and delight.
Well, hi, Carl. How are you? How are you coping with the lockdown?
Well, I'm well in myself, and I think I am coping with the lockdown. It's becoming a bit tedious, isn't it? All these weeks of not being able to get out and to do things, especially with the sunny weather. I think, though, I think we're having a few problems, like everyone. We're separated from family members. I've got elderly parents, and so is Sally, and we worry about them. How they're coping. My dad was ill just before the COVID crisis, so he was in hospital having stents done. So we worry about them, and our routines have broken down. I don't know whether you found that, but the things that we were normally doing that kept us cheerful and added a bit of light to the day, that some of those things have gone, and we're having to invent new routines, a bit restricted, not being able to go out and walk in the countryside. And obviously we're cooped up together, Sally and I. We don't normally spend quite so much time together with rubbing alongside each other, and that can have its own frictions and tensions. So yeah, I think that although we are coping, it's not an easy, effortless process.
Well, I guess that's something that all of us are experiencing in some way or other to some extent. But you're in a special position, aren't you? Because you're working in general practice. I'm not sure whether you're working full-time now. It's probably just a part-time situation, is it, Carl? But anyway, how's that going? Is that working out well for you?
Yeah, well, I work, obviously we've been back and forth to India, so I don't work full time. I just work when I come back to the UK, and I just work a couple of days a week in general practice now. But it's very different now than before. There's been a dramatic change in the NHS, and general practice is totally different than it has ever been. I'm used to dealing with people face to face, and now everything is done over the phone. And sometimes we can use a webcam to interview people, and that's helpful. But generally, things are done over the phone. And And I find that quite difficult to adjust to. I'm used to being able to double check things and verify things by physical examination, and that isn't quite so easy. So you find yourself having to balance risks a lot more with that. And the other thing about it is there's not much help you can give to people. When you're speaking on the phone, there's a lot of people who are anxious and depressed at the moment, and they really need support. They really need people to talk to, and it's not the same doing that over the phone. So I think that's been quite difficult with all the mental health issues. The only support that's available is the odd phone call and contact, and I find that quite difficult to explain to people that they're just going to basically have to manage as best they can just with that little bit of over the phone support.
Okay, well, it all seems a little bit gloomy and uncertain, doesn't it, at the moment? Do you think there's any light? Can you see any light at the end of the tunnel? It seems to be going on a very long time for us.
Well, I think in terms of the COVID virus, that is really uncertain, and the science would say that we're going to struggle to get a vaccine, and treatment for these viruses is exceedingly difficult. Everyone knows how difficult it is to cure the common cold, and these viruses are cold viruses, just with this added lethal dimension. But I think there is light in the tunnel and at the end of the tunnel. I think that's important to grasp that in these days, and not to just focus on the gloomy side. It's quite interesting that the Chinese word for crisis is made up of two characters. The first one means danger, and the second one means opportunity. And we're very aware, aren't we, of the danger of COVID. We've heard about nearly 35,000 deaths, and so many people have lost their jobs, businesses have closed down, the economy is really struggling. We know how difficult it is, when that's on our screens all the time. But there are opportunities as well, and I think that there are opportunities for us to learn ways in which we can help ourselves in these situations, and ways in which we can help each other, and ways in which we can do things differently. And the post-COVID world, whatever that is going to be, I'm sure will be positively impacted by the virus. We'll find ways around it which will make us better and stronger.
Okay, well, thanks. Well, we're obviously very much in the middle of the crisis at the moment, and we'll see how things develop over the next few weeks and months. But just for today, are there any particular tips that you would give to us as we think about the situation we face right now?
Yeah, well, we all come in different shapes and sizes, so any tips we give won't suit everyone. And I hope that in the weeks ahead, as we have opportunity to chat about, ways in which we can strengthen our mental resilience, that everyone will benefit from those sessions week by week. I just wanted to share something today, which strikes me as being a bit of simple advice that can help if you're struggling with anxiety. I've got an elderly mum, and she was telling me that she was struggling with anxiety and not sleeping quite so well. And my advice to her, which has proved to be effective, is don't watch so much news. Don't get so involved in the media, because we have 24-hour news now, and it's all bad, and that's their job, is to find the bad news and to keep hitting us with that. And that can be very demoralizing, and it can engender an awful lot of anxiety. So I told my mum, and I think I advise anxious patients, watch the news just once a day, preferably not at the end of the day before you're going to bed. And get your information just that once a day, and don't dwell on it unnecessarily. There's a verse in the prophet Isaiah. It's written a long time ago, but it was also in difficult days. They were facing a threat from other nations. And Isaiah in chapter 8 and verse 12 says, don't be like everybody else. Don't fear what they fear. Don't take on their worries. And, trust, fear God, look to God in these days. And I think if you are struggling with anxiety, then one of the things that I'd say, a very simple piece of advice, don't get wrapped up in the 24-hour news agenda, and just absorb it once a day so you're up to date. Don't take on the fears that they would like to build up in you at this difficult time.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Carl. It's been great to talk. And as Carl intimated, there is a follow-up for this. We're hoping that there will be some further discussions that we can have on this topic as the weeks go on. And to conclude our programme for today, I've just included a link to that song that has gone viral this week. Blessings. Blessings be with you.